we've dried off the soil sample. It's been drying for a couple of weeks, and I've got some soil here from a previous sample which I'm going to use today. So what you would do, having collected the sample and you've labelled it so you know where it was from, you put it in the pestle and mortar. You're gonna use that to crunch it up. So I'm just going to crunch it up because you want everything below 2 millimeters. That's the sand, the silt and the clay. We're not interested in anything bigger than that for these tests. So we just literally give that a good old crunch up. This is pretty hard, so already that's suggesting to me there's quite a bit of clay in here. So really give it a good crunch. Some of it, if it won't break down, don't worry. Just break down what you can. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use a 2 millimeter sieve, because sand is the biggest particle, so it's coming down from 2. Clay is the smallest particle, less than 0.002 of a millimeter. So we're going to just tip a little bit of that mixture in, give that a sieve, and now as you can see I've got material there less than 2 millimeters, and that's the bit we're going to test. Now you can do a very quick sort of like hand test just to see if it's quite a clay content or if it's gritty. It's a sand content. If you can roll it into a bit of a ball, it'll be more clay. If it's got more clay in it, we will gather up the clay and put it in, and we'll need probably about a centimetre will do it, because we're going to put some barium sulfate into this. And what that does, that pushes the particles of clay apart. It's what we call flocculation. It pushes them apart, which will allow the indicator in. So I'm going to put that much. Now if it was sand, I'd put more sand and less barium sulfate. So in this case, I've got some clay, and I'm going to put some barium sulfate in now. Just cut that down, but it's quite a big spatula I'm using today. Pretty big. And we'll pop that in. Now, it's not a bad idea also to wear, when you come to handle the universal indicator, is to use some gloves. So we'll use gloves when we come onto that part. You could use gloves from the start, of course. So as you can see, I've got quite a bit of barium sulfate, enough to push that clay apart. And then what I'm going to do is to use some deionized water or distilled water to take this up. It's going to take it up to about here, and then I'm going to put about 1 centimetre of the universal indicator to tell the difference. So I'm just going to push that up to the first marker there. Okay, so we've put some water in, and the next thing we're going to do is to put the universal indicator in. Just going to pop it into the rack, and then what we do is we create a vacuum by squeezing the pipette, put it into the mix, and then let go, and it draws up the fluid. And we'll just put that in. Okay, just going to do one more small shot of that. And then we've got all our ingredients.
On the proprietary testing kit, Mike, they have increments already on the test tube, don't they? So you know the correct quantities of these things to put in.
Absolutely, yeah, that's right. And when we'll do the test with an alternative kit, just so you can see the type of kit that you get from a garden centre. So I'm just going to put a bung in the lid. Now, the test tubes normally would have 2 bungs, and if, for example, when you go to sort of tap this and get the soil to mix, it won't mix. You can kind of let a little bit of air in, and sometimes it just kind of mixes up a bit easier. But this one's fine. This one is mixing up. I'm going to just give that a shake for a minute or so. Yeah, it's kind of all nice and got an even colour now. And so we'll pop that in, and I can now pop that into the rack. So we've let that settle for a period of time, and you can see that the colours are settling out nicely. It's quite a sort of a dark green kind of colour, and what you do, it's better in natural light, but you kind of compare it to your chart. Now I think they're slightly faded, the colours, but you can see that on this chart that it's aiming at between 7.5 and 8. So I would say, it's heading towards the 8. So we've got quite a limey or alkaline soil. And what that's going to mean for vegetables, it means brassicas are going to be really happy and they're not going to get so much club root. You'd avoid growing things like potatoes, which prefer it slightly acidic. Strawberries, raspberries like it slightly acidic. If you were growing trees and shrubs, you'd avoid plants like ericaceous plants like rhododendron, pyrus, camellia, any of the sort of cowberry or vacciniums, anything like that, you wouldn't grow them. Or you'd have to alter the pH quite a bit, which is quite tricky because it involves adding chips of sulfur and different things like that. So that's our test done with the traditional BDH kit. We're going to have a go now with a proprietary brand, one that you possibly could get at a garden centre. Okay, so let's have a look at that one. So this is the Masters soil test kit we've got, and you get something similar to this. This will probably do about 10 tests. This one will actually do nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium as well as pH. And what you have is you have your little pH indicator. You've got your barium sulfate, which flocculates the material you're using, and you can see in here that you've actually got various other bits and pieces. You've got a tube, and you've got your little indicator for your nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and you've also got some nice little miniature spatulas. And obviously you've got a set of instructions, and the final thing you've got in the instruction booklet, you've got your swatches to tell you what the pH is or how much nitrogen, etc. is in it. So let's have a look at this one. So I'm just going to use a test tube, and in this particular kit what you do is you use sort of 1 part of the soil to 4 parts of distilled water. So in my case, I'm going to just use some more of this soil. I think I've just hopefully just about got enough in there. I'm going to put up to the 2.5 mil mark of soil. So I'm going to pop that in, 5, and then 4 parts. I'm just going to actually take it up to, we've got 1, 2, 3 up to about here, 4 parts of distilled water. So we're just going to put that in. And there we go. Put the cork in, and we'll give that a little bit of a shake. So you're making like a soup with this one, and there are electronic kits which you can dip into the soup solutions as well. With an electronic kit you have to calibrate it. So when you buy an electronic kit, you have a little tablet which is a pH of 4, which you put with distilled water. So the electronic kit, you put it in the pH of 4 and check that it's reading 4, and then you might have another tablet which is a definite 8, and you have to put it in, you have to rinse it, put it in the 8 to check that it's working properly and calibrate it. So this, I'm just going to give that a good shake up, and this is going to give me a solution which I'm then going to use in the kit. So I'm just going to pop that in the rack, just give that a few seconds to just mix up and dilute. Now in the instructions on this one, what we've got here is we're going to actually add 4 parts water to 1 part of distilled water, seal the container, shake it for 30 seconds or so, which we've done, allow the sample to settle, which could take a little while, and then what we're going to do is, it says we're going to use the pipette. So we've got a pipette here, and we're going to draw that up, and I'm going to add that into this container up to the 3mm mark. Okay, so we're going to do that, and we'll take that out. Okay, going to take a bit of the liquid, and we'll just squeeze it, let it draw up, and then we'll pop that in. That's up to just below, just about 1.5. get a bit more, suck that up, put it back in the rack, and again we're going to go up to there's the 1, 2, and there's the 3mm mark there, so we'll just watch that as it comes up. And there we have it, we're up to the 3, just a tad more, let that settle, a little bit more, and we're up to the 3mm mark on there. So the next thing we're going to do is add 1/2 mil of the indicator. We're just going to add the pH solution. We're going to add just squirt that in, 1/2 mil, and you can see it's about halfway up there, so that's all I need of the indicator solution. Pop that back in the box, and then the next thing I'm going to need is a little bit of the barium sulfate. Get the top off. Just going to check the amount. The amount, it just says 1 heaped scoop, and we're using these little mini spatulas for that. So we'll pop that in there. Okay, press that down. That's that, and then we just got to pop the top on, and we'll give that a bit of a shake. Okay, so give it a little bit of a shake, and we'll leave that and see what happens when it settles out. Okay, I think we get a reading fairly quickly with that one. I'm going to pop the spatula back in there and go. So you can see here it's been settled for a little while, and it's definitely into the 7.5 plus. You can see that comparing it to, certainly not acid to the top, you can see it's very much more 7.5 high pH on this particular sample. And bearing in mind the other kit, which is a slightly different calibration, they're not a million miles apart actually, those two. So that concludes that we've definitely got a high pH limey soil. Obviously all we need to do now is to dispose of this, wash out the tubes, a little bit of distilled water, rinse, and then they're ready for a test in the future. Okay, so that's soil testing.